Hey, Andrew. So it's great to have you on the show. Andrew has been in Infra Data Cloud for 25 years, a CRO who has sold over 2 billion in ARR. Not everyone can say that. His passion is in helping companies at the intersection of GTM, product strategy, and marketing to avoid traps that many can fall into. How about if you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. Great to be here. Andrew Rettinger. I think you embarrassed me properly, right? So I've got great passion for this space and have been lucky to be in this industry for a while. So happy to chat and hopefully there's some learnings along the way.
How did I do a good job on the intro? So we were
Good work.
talking about some ideas that can help early stage folks, whether it's sharpening the ICP or doing it right or wrong, a good strategy, avoiding traps. So I'm just going to let you go on because I'm sure you have a lot to share.
Yeah, well, look, it's a fascinating and fantastic time to be building a startup, right? In an early stage, right? It's less costly than ever to get an MVP out the door. You've got more brilliant folks that are taking their swing and their crack at this, right? At the same time, capital's far more expensive, right? And growth rates have slowed, right? So you have this cocktail that you need to navigate through. And I think from a go to market perspective, founders need to do the first at least $1 million in sales, depending on your ASP, potentially more. And as founders do that, they're the most uniquely qualified folks to take their idea, their thesis, their passion, their perceived value, and articulate that to folks. Even if it's investor referrals or in their network, you've got to establish those patterns. I think it's really important when they do that to document the journey, the positive, the learnings, the opportunity. And if you had to start all over again, what would you do? So then as you start to advance forward in your go to market functions, right, you've got a set of data that you can leverage to start to make some sense of informed decisions and really hone in on that, the ICP personas, et cetera. And too many people are thinking that when they do that, they've reached product market fit. In my opinion, it's not even close. It's just getting started to getting some data as an input to a model.
Sounds like there's a lot of info that you have there stored in your head. So let's say I'm a founder right now. I want to reach my first million. How do I go about building my ICP?
Yeah, a lot of info or a lot of mistakes or a lot of both, Danielle. But yeah, so look, I mean, if you're a founder, like you're not so much really worried about like quote unquote an ICP, the personas, how you help them make money, save money, reduce risk, and like all of the classical things that like revenue leaders would go through. It's not that inherently those concepts aren't true and that you're not going to go do them. But if I'm a founder, right, I seemingly have a thesis for why I am creating this product in this company because there's a problem in the market that largely, if you're a technical founder, you found from a set of first principles thinking, right? I was an engineer at Uber and Lyft. We were running our data management practice this way. I did not have a database that scaled to 9 million transactions that processed in 7.4 milliseconds that would then deliver this response through a messaging bus. A lot of them are just like, hey, this is how I found it, which is brilliant. So they take that thesis. Their job is to go find the first dozen customers of their peers that have those problems that will then validate or deny what that original thesis was. And you might find out along the way, very good thesis, but you're solving a different problem. You might find out wrong thesis, different way. You might find right thesis, you got to tweak some things. And there's a whole bunch of those things that, that's the founder's job to go do. Of course, they should surround themselves with advisors and folks that can help along the way, right? That's a really prudent idea, but that's kind of really the journey that you have to go on. And you're going to learn a lot, right? Good, bad, and indifferent. And I always say there's nothing bad, right? No bad mistakes as long as you learn from them, right? Part of the game.
Are there any do's and don'ts that you're aware of around building that ICP and making sure that you're going in the right direction or that it's narrowed down enough?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, early on, you want to go after companies that can give you velocity and make buying decisions on an accelerated time frame. So first, you need to look at company size. I don't think you'd want to start calling on JP Morgan because your problem you think is so big and they got 64,000 technologists and an IT budget of 15 billion and you do the mental math, oh wow, I'm 0.001% and I can go get myself a 500K deal. Doesn't quite work like that. You'll die and that'll take you 2 years to go do that. So first is like, what's the company size that I can go get some velocity and get some at bats and learn, right? The second, like inside of that is like, who can be build partners with you? Like, who can just be friendly even in that size of company that might not pay you, but might help advance that for you? A lot of people willing to go do that. And so I think you really need to start there. Say, okay, if that's where I'm starting, how do I go get 8 to 12 meetings a week, right? Doing that, right? And you got to put yourself out there, right? You've got to be social. You've got to send the message, all of the blocking and tackling things that you'd have to go do, and you can recalibrate from there. But you got to get after it. It's all about velocity early on.
I can relate to a lot of the points that you mentioned now. And you said 8 to 12 meetings, and I can tell you that that's a big challenge for a lot of founders. How can they go about and get all of those meetings without a full account executive team or SDR team?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a founder's job when you start the company, right? So you are the AE, you are the SDR, you are the SE, you are you are all of that, right? So that's the first thing. Realize it, right? I guess if you told me I was an engineer to start, I'd be like, whoa, how do I go do that? And that's scary to me, right? Maybe I could figure out, maybe I couldn't. Technical founders could do a way better job selling than I could, being technical. But nonetheless, right, that's the job. So I think the first thing, right, again, right, is when you actually create the thesis and the foundation of the company, right, ensure that you've got people to go talk to early on, not just an idea that you wouldn't even know how to go attract people, right? Because if those two things are too far dislocated, it's just one more impediment and one more hill to climb. Not that you can't, just makes it a lot harder. Second thing is obviously surround yourself with very good advisors and investors early on that can kind of help accelerate those discussions. The third thing is use automation and use a lot of the tooling out there available to you to go drive those conversations. Come on podcasts like yours, network with other founders, post a lot of value added content to LinkedIn, reach out to the personas you think have the problems that you're trying to solve and try to get feedback, work the ecosystem, your personas that you're going after. Where are they already trusted in an ecosystem with what vendors? Try to get into an angle through those folks, right? Where they already have a trusted relationship that you could intercept them. There's a myriad of things that you have to do. No single thing is the silver bullet. You got to do them all. It's part of the trial and error of this business, and you just got to embrace it and have fun with it.
I like that a lot. So let's zoom in a little bit more on founder led sales. What does that term mean for you, and how do you execute right on it, and how do you execute wrong on it?
What does it mean? It means when I start a company, my job is to go bring in the first, let's say at least $1 million in revenue, right? Like that is my job. Seemingly, you've taken some capital, whether it's been seed or Series A or pre-seed or whatever we would want to call it. But even if you didn't, it's your fiduciary responsibility to yourself, let alone yourself and the investors, to go do that, right? So you better realize that, like when you start, or have a co-founder, right, which you're like more technical and the co-founder will go do that. And I see a lot of that too, where you bring that in, and that's okay. That's great. So first thing is, eyes wide open, just realize that is your job, right? And that's the best way to create the most successful company. The second thing is just go out there and do it. And like anything in sales, you will fail more times than you will succeed. It's okay, which is also very hard for a technical founder because they would never write more code, right, that failed than succeeded. Like forget all sorts of integration tests and CI and see all that stuff. But like at the end of the day, when it got to production, like that's a hard concept. And so you got to kind of change your mental model to realize like you're going to strike out a lot. That's part of the game. Yeah, it's not fun, right? But you have to go do that, embrace it, have fun, get after it, and remember the reason you're creating this company, right, is this technology seemingly is going to solve a very big problem for a lot of people. So go get out there and let them experience it, enjoy it, and embrace it. And if it doesn't work, well, hey, we learned, and now you got to go make a pivot.
Do you have any thoughts on, let's say, creating the messaging for your outbound, right? Like, let's say I'm a founder now and I'm sending lots of conversations on automation. I'm trying to create connections. I'm trying to get people to come onto meetings. How about like a direct approach versus an indirect approach? Am I looking for asking for feedback? Am I trying to make a direct sale? And then every X amount of time, make a pivot until I get that nail that messaging. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, look, no one wakes up every day saying, "Hey, look, I'd love to go spend 4 hours of my day today just giving random people feedback on their product, like for no reason, right?" So it's not like it's that easy to say, "Oh, you're not trying to sell anything, just go get feedback." Time is a very scarce resource, right, for everyone, right? Whether it's true or not, or perceived or not, it's there. So, I mean, first of all, you've got to run a lot of iterative experiments and do a lot of A B testing. It's not even A B testing, it's like A, B, C, D, E testing, right? You have to run a lot of experiments across a bunch of different areas, like I mentioned before, whether it's channels, whether it's messaging, whether it's routes, whether it's asks. And there's no one thing that's going to work. But at the end of the day, early on, if you're starting this company and you have not surrounded yourself with people that can help you in that early stage, it's going to be really hard. So while you need to go do all of that, they should have someone like you or me or an investor or peers of ours or others in the industry or adjacent people that are already signed up believing in the mission that will help bring some warm people to the table to at least get that feedback, right? So if you can't get 30 to 50 of those from your early network that you're forming this company around and getting people to believe in it, it's going to be a real uphill battle. So really that's the best way. But then once you have that, you'd want to start to in parallel employ some of the things we're talking about.
It makes a lot of sense. The next topic I'd like to ask you about is brand and trust. How do you approach brand and trust at such an early stage?
Well, they kind of are polar opposites, right? If you're early stage, we're talking about founder led selling, we're talking sub a million ARR and sub a dozen customers. You're not going to really have a brand, let alone be trusted in anything, right? Now, you could come from a really solid pedigree where I've been an engineer, let's say, at a top tech company for a long time and have done a lot of things, right? So you could have a brand in yourself and trust by virtue of the systems you've built. Again, I'm an infrastructure, you know, guy. So let's say there was a lead engineer at Netflix that built their microservices based scaffolding, right? And have done that for a long time. Like I got trust because I've built that at scale in mission critical systems. But my company isn't going to have that, right? Just my ideas are. So again, it comes back to going to meet with your peers. And look, so that's the first thing, right? The best way to get it is to go talk to others, right? That will look at you from a set of your first principles thinking and relate to it, right? And give you a shot. The second thing is you just got to go do some things, right? You have to put some content out there. You don't need 100 things. You don't need AI to go put a bunch of useless crap out there and overdo it. But a couple of very simple thought leadership pieces on why you founded the company, the problem to solve, your first principle set of thinking and journey through this, right? How you could engage with people, where you see the industry headed for those. If you have and do a really nice job of a couple of quick videos, some, things on YouTube, a couple of blogs, like nothing over the top is really the way in which you could then lean into that. But it doesn't have to be anything at mass scale or crazy.
Cool. So, how about if we do a small exercise and let's say that you and I are founders, you're the CEO of a data infra company in 2024. We just raised the seed round. And now we have to go and get a bunch of meetings and build as much trust as possible. How would you go about doing that? What kind of content would you create? And how would you start trying to get those meetings as soon as possible?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would do is I'd be raising money from people, like I said, that would give me introductions to start with, assuming that I didn't have a lot in that area. So choose your partners wisely. The second, seemingly as we formed the company, you and I had built a list of people that we would go talk to and we're already talking to about our idea to validate that. So now we should have two lists, right? We should have our investors, our partners, or advisors. We should have the list that we put together, right? And then you and I should sit in an office together and say, like, all right, we're forming this company because we believe this piece of infrastructure software is going to do X for Y people, right? We should then build our 10 slide deck on that. Not that anyone wants a deck, that's not my point, but it gives us a very standard and repeatable framework to talk about who we are, what's the value, and how we would engage with people, right? Maybe you need to leave behind, but at least it gets us aligned. I always find by doing that together, you get aligned on what that is and you say standard and consistent. It could be a Word doc, it could be a Notion page. Like I'm not married to slides, right? Because no developer and infrastructure actually wants slides. The second thing is, like I said, let's go get a blog post out there on why we created the company. And let's commit to a content calendar for the next 6 weeks where we're going to set aside the time to go write one a week. And again, I'm not trying to drive SEO, all sorts of marketing things. I'm just trying to get that out there so that as people came to our website, they looked at this, they, oh, wow, these are interesting thoughts, right? And then you can in parallel, start some of your automation outbound and other things. It's just the basics, right? And people just want to understand, like, who are you? Like, a lot of people just have billboards out there, or you can kind of just be out there, like, here's what we're doing, here's our value, right? We'd like to talk to you, and you could take either path. I'm not saying one's better than the other, totally up to you.
Got it. And what kind of benchmarks would you have in your mind for the first between 30 to 120 days? Like, what kind of metrics would you want to see that'll tell you we need to double down on this?
Well, look, they're going to largely be activity based, right? Because you can't expect in the first 90 days, right, revenue metrics or conversion rate metrics or any of the science of scaling, right? So throw all that out the window. So now let's say, what's the most important thing? Am I talking to core personas and the ideal customers that I believe, right, the value of our solution, right, should meet? So now you're like, all right, that's what I should stay focused on, right? So how many meetings am I having with those people? Am I in fact talking to those people? Right? Am I getting right second and third meetings? Am I getting them into my product experience to give me feedback and learn and understand? Right? So I should just be laser focused on that. Right? Again, there's no like silver bullet here, but you should be striving for 8 to 12 of those a week. Right? So if I'm doing this over a month period, right? Let's just call that 30 to 50 meetings I want to have, right, every single month. And so over those first 90 days, can I have 100+ of those meetings, right? And what am I learning, right? Am I getting 2% of those to engage with me and say, this is interesting? Am I getting 25% saying, holy shit, you're going to change my life and make it 10x better, but then none of them return my phone call, right? Am I 12% conversion rate? And now I've said, oh, this is the company. And actually now I could get my first sale or two. And what are those patterns and those metrics? So you're really in that data collection game, but you can only collect the data if you get in the game. The only way to get in the game is to get the meetings. Does that make sense, Daniel?
It makes a lot of sense. Now, I think everyone's talking about this. You can't not talk about it. And each startup is saying, we incorporate AI to do X, right? How do you feel AI is changing the landscape? How is it affecting these early stage processes as well?
Well, look, I mean, if I start from the last part, affecting your processes, look, AI does provide a level of automation where people can create code faster, they can create apps faster, you can manage your infrastructure better, like all of those things, right? So, as far as operational efficiency on how you actually build the thing that it is that you're building, it's affording you co-pilots and everything else a lot of flexibility. It doesn't mean humans aren't necessary; they're actually more necessary than ever, right? It's just giving you a good starting point. I think if you kind of then reverse engineer from the top down, I think it's actually a little overplayed. I read a really good tweet by Jason Lemkin yesterday, right? And he said, hey, here's a hack for VCs. The least competitive seed and A rounds right now are those that have no AI, that are just like typical SaaS companies, right? So, I think the AI hand and cards being a little bit overplayed right now in the early stage, unless you're fundamentally setting out to change one of the core processes inside of AI. You're going to create a new model for some reason or some way in which like vectors or embeddings kind of work better, or you're trying to enable all the software to become agentic and how all agents work. Like, unless you're, don't overplay it, right? It's kind of taken for granted. And it's like, it's about the outcome. It's not about how and the tech that you're using to go do it. Think about the cloud days, right? It was just like an easier way to run your HR system with Workday. It's an easier way to do a whole bunch of things. It's the outcome that you're after. I don't have to manage servers. I don't have to do those things. And I think not enough people are focused on the outcome. They're focused way more on the tech, and the buyers at the end of the day still wake up and have problems that they need solved. And that's what you have to help them with.
So, what do you think the correct way to involve AI would be?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's a brain dead obvious statement to say you have to be using AI in your stack and there has to be an AI layer here, right? Don't get me wrong. But just saying I'm AI for this doesn't mean it's like, oh, wow, let me talk to you. Overplaying your hand, it really at the end of the day, focus on the outcomes and the business problems that you're trying to solve for your key personas in the accounts that you believe are most likely to engage and buy from you early on. Stay focused on that. Don't stay focused on the technology that is going to enable that. You need to find people that have the problems that you believe you created your company to go solve. If it's because my AI is a co-pilot, I'm going to help you create test coverage on your code at 3x better and create all these simulations so like you're just good with your code, great, focus on that. If it's a way in which you can produce content better, great, but you better focus on the quality. If it's for some process in the CPG space, focus on the outcome and how you optimize visibility into your supply chain planning. And you can help to leverage data to drive those outcomes from hard to reach places. Don't lose sight of those outcomes.
Got it. So it's more important to solve the pain, doesn't matter how, and then you can have AI complement or help you along the way. It's similar to, I think, what good software engineers consider this, like ignore the tech stack. First, I'm an engineer. I want to solve a problem. Maybe I just use a no code tool. And then, I figure out the right tool to solve the problem with. So there's a layer of abstraction that comes beforehand.
Exactly. And the best engineers in the world don't have a bias to the tools or the techniques or how they go solve that. They start with a blank slate. I have a problem. What's the best way to solve it? Maybe I hate Postgres for whatever reason. I don't like the logo. I had whatever it is. But if Postgres at the end of the day happens to be the right and best way for you to kind of deploy in that, then you go do that. It's kind of that blank slate, and you have to take a very similar approach. How do you solve those problems and focus on that? There's too many startups out there way too focused on very specific technical features, right, that are not connected to outcomes, right? And that is going to cause a lot of churn at that layer, right? There's a lot of startups right now, and it's a very crowded space, and anyone can go deploy AI, and anyone can go deploy AI to drive automation in useless, cold emails that don't even get delivered to a primary inbox, right? Much more crowded, much more noise.
What other types of traps do you see early stage startups fall into?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest trap, right? You need to be maniacally focused on the problems that you solve for the people that you believe can benefit from those problems and go and prove that out. You started a company, you got some seed money, you got to get to $1 million. That's your job. Once you start to get to $2 and $3 million, now it's like, okay, we're looking at a different set of opportunities. How do we go get to 10? Now I'm raising my Series A, right? It's a different set of problems. Now, don't scale too fast just because you got there. Don't go hire 6 reps just because you've got there, right? Don't go, hire 8 people in marketing, right? Growth is a lot slower than it was, and capital is a lot more expensive. So now when you're at that stage, you're having to position your company in a much different way, right? It's really those stepping stones and those building blocks. But again, if you're early stage and you don't prove out that first $1 million yourself, like who's going to do it and how are you going to do it? You'll die.
So, what is scaling too fast?
Scaling too fast is just really over investing in people and processes that are not proven, right, to have a return. So you would scale. I mean, let's reverse engineer the problem. Like, when would you scale? I would scale when I knew that if I invested $1, right, in doing this, it's going to yield me $4 in this time frame, right, against this process. And when I have a formula and a science that says I can go do that in a consistent, repeatable way to the same people, to the same types of companies in the same way, service them, grow them, make them successful, have them refer their friends and their customers and their aunts and their uncles and their friends, right? Now I can go start to scale against that in a repeatable way so that I have the productivity engine, right, that's yielding this in a very cost effective and profitable way. That is when you want to do it. Too many people get to that, like, let's say, $1 to $2 million stage. They raise 15 or 20 million bucks in a Series A, and they go hire 15 people and go to market, and they don't even know what those folks are going to go do, right? The silent killer is actually you're asking all of them to go figure out your product market fit and asking them to go figure out how to go scale all of this when you don't have something that's repeatable, and half of those people might work, half might not. You're going to churn through people and money and time and energy and likely not get to the right answer. Failure.
So, when I think of something that's repeatable or scalable, I think about the world of ads, right? If I see there's a good ROI on a certain ad or a certain campaign, I know, hey, I can just pour in more money and double my return. How do I know if I have a repeatable engine in a startup? How do I know that it is time to scale?
First of all, very few get it, so it's very hard. right? So you start with the bias that you don't have it and you probably won't get it, but that's your job, is to go find that, right? And to go get it. So how do you know? Well, again, if I'm a founder and I'm getting us to $1 million in sales, like let's say the ASP is like 50 grand, we now have 20 deals, right? In those 20 deals that I sell to Daniel, is Daniel the VP of engineering, right, at a company that's 200 to 1,000 employees, right, that's building software in this manner, and we're doing X and they've seen Y in value in return, right? Now, again, that's only 20 customers. It's not like it's 2,000, but now I have something that is repeatable. I've got 20 Daniels that I've done the same thing for in the same way. And hopefully you're all like, yes, this is awesome, Andrew. It's fantastic. Like, I'd be happy to tell my friends about it. Right now, you have that. Is that the only thing? No. Can you expand to others? Of course. Can you go upstream, downstream, all that? Of course. That's what you have to nail. Said another way, if you got to $1 million on one deal, that's fantastic from a revenue marker. But if you prove that anything's repeatable,
So basically, it's the same process of customer acquisition, the aha moment, and saying, okay, this sales process is repeatable. Let's just do it to another 50 customers.
correct. That's right. And now you're able to say, okay, I can hire a sales rep, and you can look for the characteristics of a sales rep that enjoys being the first rep into startups, of which there is a whole population of extremely talented individuals that excel at that craft. Hey, Daniel, look, I'm the founder. I've done the first million in sales, right? Here's 20 customers. Here's what we've done. Here's what we've gone after. Come in, go talk to them, understand this, but I believe here are the things that we can go scale. And we've looked at this, and there's another 500 of these companies, and here's, you got to go find another 500 Daniels that you can go after, and just stay very laser focused there. And you can achieve some great results and feel like you're having an impact on the company, right? And grow and be part of this. And ultimately, then we can kind of go scale out from there, right? Does that make sense?
Let's talk about when the sailing is not so smooth, right? So ideally, you have founders that manage to go 0 to 1. They created a machine. Now we can hire a CMO, CRO, whatever is needed, and scale, right? But I think many times the reality is not like that. Founders don't have the skills to create that machine by themselves. So they still do hire early on bright people that do try to help them create that machine. How do you view that?
Well, first of all, do not hire CROs or CMOs at $1 million in sales. That's the worst thing that you could do. So no, 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 and more no. Okay. You need that when you've gotten to product market fit, when you've got far more density. If we had to pick a number, like let's say it's 20 million bucks or 15 to 20 million bucks, is when you can start to build all of that out. And seemingly, again, a lot of customers, assuming that's not from two customers. So the first thing is, do not hire those people, like myself included. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't hire people in those disciplines to help, but you need doers to go help. So you would hire someone in marketing that could be simply a developer advocate or a technical persona that does technical based marketing to work with the Daniels of the world on a peer to peer basis and to create some content that's going to resonate with you, right? It doesn't have to be the most polished. It just has to start to be effective to now support the salesperson that's going to go after those people. Those are sort of the incremental building blocks that you have to go after. Like, there's no scaling at $1 million. Like, you've just started to scratch the surface and prove some things out. It's all very small incremental steps.
Makes a lot of sense, Andrew.
It's a great time. It's a lot of fun. And I wish everyone a tremendous amount of success. I love it. And stay focused, stay disciplined, and really nail the outcomes and your value proposition for the personas of the people based on the thesis of why you created the company. And you'll get data and you'll go from there.
Thanks so much, Andrew.